The wire transfer cleared at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I know the exact time because I was still at my desk when the confirmation came through, and I remember thinking, as I had every quarter for 11 years, that it was strange how easily $15 million could move. How it disappeared from one column and appeared in another with less ceremony than ordering takeout. A few keystrokes. A routing number. A memo line that reads simply, "Family support. I am a forensic accountant. I have spent my career inside the math that other people hope no one notices. I find the gap between what the ledger says and what actually happened. I have testified in federal court. I have handed prosecutors the exact page, the exact line, the exact number that unraveled everything. I know what money means. I know what it obscures. And I know better than most that the cleanest looking balance sheet is often the one hiding the most. The thing I didn't know, not for a very long time, was that the account I'd been funding my entire adult life was one I never agreed to open. Welcome to Family Revenge Stories New, the channel where quiet people keep the receipts, and family learns that boundaries come with a balance due. If stories about dignity, documentation, and the moment the ledger finally closes are your thing, drop a comment and subscribe. Because this one took 11 years to resolve, and I'm going to tell you every line of it. My name is irrelevant. What matters is what I do. Forensic accountants see the world in flows. Money comes from somewhere. Money goes somewhere. Every transaction tells a story, and every story has an author. The people who hire me have usually stopped believing the story they've been told. They hand me a box of documents and say something doesn't add up, and I sit down and find out what. I got into the work because of my grandfather. Not because he was wronged, because he was scrupulously fair, in a family that treated fairness as a flaw. He kept records of everything. Every loan. Every gift. Every favor extended and received. Not out of paranoia. Out of respect for the truth. He believed that if you were going to give something, you should do it with open eyes. And if you were going to receive something, you should know what it cost. He died when I was 23. He left me his Rolodex, his library, and a plain envelope with my name on it in his handwriting. Inside was a single index card. It read, "The most dangerous number in any family is the one no one is allowed to say out loud." I kept the card. It lives in the second drawer of my desk. I married David when I was 28. He was a civil engineer, patient and deliberate in the way people are when they've learned that doing something slowly and correctly is faster than doing it quickly and wrong. We had a house with a vegetable garden he loved more than anything. He grew tomatoes that embarrassed the grocery store variety. He made me coffee every morning before I woke up, because he rose at 5 and I rose at 6, and in that hour he had already decided the day was worth having. We did not have a lavish life. We had a precise one. My family was something else entirely. My parents were not cruel people. That's the thing about this kind of story. The people in it are rarely villains in their own telling. My mother was warm and demonstrative and lived entirely in the present tense, which meant she had no particular relationship with consequences. My father was proud in the quiet, immovable way of men who believe the family name is a form of capital and must be protected accordingly. And then there was Marcus. Marcus is my younger brother by 4 years. He is gifted in the way that sometimes looks like genius and sometimes looks like an elaborate performance of genius. He is charming in rooms full of people and exhausting in rooms with just 2. My parents loved him the way people love a project they've invested everything in, not quite separate from themselves but an extension. Their best intentions made flesh. I was the other thing. The one who made sense. The one who paid her own tuition, bought her own car, sent a card on every birthday, and showed up with the exact right bottle of wine for every dinner party. I was reliable. Reliability in my family was not a virtue they celebrated. It was a resource they used. I didn't see it for a long time. That's the arithmetic I didn't know how to run on myself. The first wire transfer went out when Marcus was 31. He had started a company, a technology consultancy, something to do with infrastructure optimization, the kind of business that sounds important and specific until you try to explain what it actually makes. He needed capital. He had burned through his savings, through a line of credit, through 2 rounds of friends and family money that had not come from me. He came to my parents. My parents came to me. It was a Sunday dinner. I remember the salmon was overcooked. My mother had set the table with the good china, which meant she wanted something and had decided atmosphere would help. My father waited until the dessert plates were cleared before he laid it out. Marcus's company had potential, real potential, he said. He'd looked at the projections. What it needed was a bridge. Something to get it through the next 18 months. He used the word investment. I asked what the return structure looked like. My mother laughed. Not unkindly. Just the laugh of a woman who has decided that a question like that is missing the point. He's your brother, she said. I asked if there was a promissory note. My father said the word family the way he always said it. Not as a noun, but as an instruction. I transferred $800,000 the following Thursday. There was no note. There was no return structure. There was a dinner and a word and the specific silence of a room waiting to see if I would do the thing I had always done. I did the thing I had always done. The $800,000 became $1.2 million 18 months later, when the bridge needed extending. Became $2.4 million the year after that. Marcus's company pivoted twice and restructured once, and at every inflection point, the ask came back through my parents at a Sunday dinner, after the dessert plates were cleared. By the time David was diagnosed, I had transferred in total 11 years of quarterly payments to the sum of just over $15 million. $15,240,000 to be precise. I know the precise number because I am a forensic accountant, and I keep records of everything. David was diagnosed in March. Glioblastoma. The kind of word that arrives like a door closing. The oncologist was direct and kind in the way that good oncologists are. He gave us information and then gave us space, and I appreciated both. David took my hand in the parking lot afterward and said, "Well, we should probably update the estate documents," and I loved him so much in that moment I couldn't speak. We spent the next 14 months doing 2 things. Living as fully as we could and putting our paperwork in order. I am a forensic accountant. David was an engineer. Between us we had more documentation than most law firms. We updated wills, trusts, beneficiary designations. We wrote letters. We organized everything into a system that would survive us. David died on a Tuesday in May. The tomatoes were coming in early that year. I picked them myself every morning for the rest of the summer, because it was the only part of the day that felt like him. I didn't tell my family about the estate for 6 weeks. I needed the 6 weeks. I was sitting at my kitchen table at 11:47 p.m. on a Thursday when I finally opened the folder David and I had built together. I poured a glass of water. I put on my reading glasses. I began at page 1. I read everything 3 times. The estate attorney's name was Patricia Wren. She had been David's attorney for 15 years and mine for 10. She is the kind of woman who speaks very slowly and precisely, and whose slowness is not hesitation but care. The same care you'd want from someone defusing something. We met in her office 3 weeks after the funeral. The walls were lined with casebooks. There was a single orchid on the credenza that had been there every time I'd visited, and had never once lost a petal. I don't know how she managed that. Patricia laid out the documents in order. David's estate was substantial. The house, investment accounts, life insurance, a trust we had structured together over many years carefully, deliberately. His estate planning had been meticulous because David was meticulous, and because I had been his partner in it. The trust had a primary beneficiary, me. It also had a contingency clause. David, it turned out, had added an amendment 14 months before he died. Just after the diagnosis, just before we began the paperwork process in earnest. The amendment was 3 pages. Patricia slid it across the desk. The amendment established a secondary trust designation. It directed that if I predeceased David, or if I chose to disclaim any portion of the estate, the disclaimed assets would not pass to my family of origin. They would pass to 3 specific organizations: a pediatric oncology research foundation, a civil engineering scholarship fund, and the local land trust that protected the watershed behind our house. David had not told me about the amendment. He left a letter instead. Patricia handed it to me in a plain envelope. My name in his handwriting. I did not open it in her office. I thanked her, collected the documents, drove home, sat in the garden, and opened it there. It was 2 paragraphs. Quiet and clear-headed the way David was. He wrote that he had watched me carry my family for as long as he had known me, that he had seen what it cost even when I didn't say it, that he had made the amendment not because he doubted me, but because he wanted me to have a document to show people if they ever suggested that generosity was something owed. The last line read, "You were never the bank. You were always the person." Those 2 things should not have been confused, and the confusion was not yours to correct. I folded the letter. I put it in my coat pocket. It has been in my coat pocket, in one coat or another, every day since. The second thing Patricia had told me, the smaller thing, the thing that didn't land until I was driving home, was this. The $15 million I had transferred to Marcus over 11 years had never been gifted. It had been loaned. Patricia had found the documentation. Not because I had filed it. Because my grandfather had. Before he died, my grandfather had drawn up a simple promissory note, one he had prepared himself, had notarized, and had filed with the county recorder's office as a recorded instrument. It named me as creditor and Marcus as debtor for any family transfers exceeding $50,000 made on Marcus's behalf with my funds. He had done it quietly, without telling anyone, the year before he died. He had sent the original to my home address in an envelope with no return address. I had found it in a box of his things. I hadn't known what it was. I had filed it and forgotten it. The recorded instrument was still valid. $15,240,000. I sat in my car in the driveway for a long time. Then I went inside and made myself dinner and read the promissory note 4 more times, very slowly, with my reading glasses and a yellow legal pad. Then I called Patricia and said, "What do we do with this?" She told me. I wrote it down. My family found out about the estate in the way families find out about things, through a combination of assumption and impatience. My mother called 8 weeks after the funeral to ask how I was doing and stayed on the line long enough to mention that Marcus had been in touch with her, and was wondering about timelines. I asked her what timelines she meant. She said, for the settlement. For the estate. I said I didn't know what she meant by that. She said, well, David was very successful and surely there would be something. She trailed off in the way she always trailed off, expecting me to fill the silence with a number. I didn't fill it. I said I was still working with the attorney and would be in touch. 3 days later Marcus called. He did not call to offer condolences. He called at 11 in the morning on a Wednesday, which meant he had planned the timing, professional hours when I would be clear-headed. He asked how I was holding up. I said fine, thank you. He asked about the house. I said I was keeping it. He said that made sense, and then he said, I just wanted to let you know I've been talking to Mom and Dad, and we all think it would be really meaningful if we could figure out some kind of arrangement. Something that honored what David would have wanted. I asked what Marcus thought David would have wanted. He said, well, David was always so generous. Family was important to him. I wrote down what Marcus said word for word in the legal pad I kept next to my phone. Then I said, that's a really interesting way to put it. Then I said nothing else. The silence lasted 14 seconds. I counted. Marcus said he'd be in town the following weekend and maybe we could all have dinner. I said that would be fine. Then I called Patricia and said, send the demand letters. If you've ever watched people who had no time to return your calls for years suddenly clear their whole calendar the moment an estate is involved, you already know exactly where this is going. Stay with me, because it gets very, very quiet before the end. The demand letters went to Marcus by certified mail and email simultaneously on a Friday afternoon at 4:15 p.m. They were 3 pages each. They referenced the recorded promissory note by filing number, date, and county. They itemized every transfer by date and amount, from the first $800,000 to the final quarterly payment. They stated the outstanding principal. They stated the interest accrued at the applicable rate. The letters arrived the same weekend my parents had planned the dinner. My mother called Saturday morning. She was not angry. She was confused, which in my family is a more dangerous state. Confusion meant she was going to explain to me why I had misunderstood the situation. She said she didn't understand what the letter was. I said it was a demand for repayment of a documented loan. She said that wasn't what the money was. I said I'd be interested to hear what she thought it was. She said it was family support. She said Marcus needed it. She said that's what you do for family. I wrote that down too. I told her I would see her Sunday for dinner and we could discuss it then. My father called an hour later. He did not express confusion. He expressed offense, which is a different animal. He said I had gone behind the family's back. I asked when the front door had been open. He said this was not what David would have wanted. I wrote that down. I told him I looked forward to seeing him Sunday. I spent Saturday evening in my study. I organized a folder. Tab 1. The promissory note certified copy. Tab 2. The transfer records all 11 years chronological. Tab 3. A printout of the text messages between Marcus and my mother that my mother had forwarded to me by accident 3 years ago, in which Marcus had referred to my contributions as, quote, the inheritance pipeline. Tab 4. David's letter. I did not put David's letter in the folder for them to see. I put it there so I could read it before I walked in. Sunday dinner was at my parents' house. My mother had made the good china again. I arrived exactly on time. The table was set for 5. My parents, Marcus, his wife Celine, who sat at the far end and spent most of the evening looking at a point on the wall approximately 8 inches above everyone's heads, and me. My mother had made pot roast, which meant she was trying to comfort someone. The question was who. We got through the first course without incident. My father poured wine. Marcus talked about a new project his firm was pursuing, a government contract, very exciting, the kind of language that sounds like news and carries no information. I asked 1 or 2 polite questions. I ate my salad. The pot roast came out. My father cleared his throat. He said he wanted to address the elephant in the room. He said he and my mother had talked, and they felt the letter, the legal letter, he said with a slight pause around the word legal, was a response to grief. That I was hurting. That when people are hurting they sometimes do things that don't reflect their true feelings. He said they wanted me to know they understood, and that they hoped we could tear up the letter and move forward as a family. Marcus nodded. My mother was looking at me with an expression that said, please just say yes. I asked if I could say something. My father said, of course. I picked up the folder. I opened tab 1. The promissory note. I set it on the table facing outward so everyone could read the header. I said, this is a document filed with the county recorder on October 14th, 11 years ago. It establishes a creditor-debtor relationship for any family transfers on Marcus's behalf exceeding $50,000. It was prepared and filed by grandfather before he died. It has been legally valid since the date of filing. Marcus said that was ridiculous. That grandfather had no authority to do that. I opened tab 2. The transfer records. 11 pages. I placed them beside the note. I said, these are the wire transfer confirmations for every payment made to Marcus or to entities controlled by Marcus over the 11-year period. The total, with interest at the applicable federal rate, is $18,412,000. My mother made a sound. I kept my voice exactly where it was. My father said I was being vindictive, that I was weaponizing my grief. He said David would be ashamed. I opened tab 3. I placed the text message printout on the table. I said, this is a text exchange between Marcus and Mom from approximately 3 years ago. Marcus refers to my financial contributions as the inheritance pipeline. I'd like to understand what he meant by that, since a pipeline implies a one-directional and ongoing flow that one party controls and one party benefits from, indefinitely with no obligation in the other direction. The room was very quiet. Marcus said those texts were private. I said they had been forwarded to me. I didn't mention that it had been an accident. Celine was still looking at the wall. My mother said quietly that she didn't think I understood how much Marcus had needed the help, how hard he had worked, how much pressure he was under. I asked how much pressure she thought David had been under at the end. She didn't answer. My father stood up. He said I was threatening my own family. He said the lawyer was going to hear from him. He said my grandfather had clearly lost his mind. I said my grandfather had been certified competent by 2 independent physicians at the time of the filing, and that the recording was a matter of public record. He sat back down. Marcus leaned forward. He said I knew what the money was for. He said I had given it voluntarily. He said I couldn't just call it a loan now because it was convenient. I opened the folder to the last tab. I didn't take David's letter out. Instead, I took out a single printed page, a timeline. Every Sunday dinner. Every request. Every wire transfer confirmation dated within 10 days of the ask. 11 years of the same pattern documented. I set it on the table. I said I didn't call it a loan. Grandfather called it a loan in a recorded legal instrument 11 years ago. I just found out about it 8 weeks ago. The only thing that changed is that I now have access to what the document says. My father said that grandfather had always been difficult, that he had never liked Marcus, that this was an act of spite from a man who couldn't let go of old grudges. I said, he left me an index card when he died. Do you want to know what it said? Nobody answered. I said it anyway. The most dangerous number in any family is the one no one is allowed to say out loud. Celine turned from the wall and looked at me directly for the first time all evening. She nodded once. Very slightly. I closed the folder. I said, I'm not going to litigate this at Sunday dinner. Patricia Wren will be in touch on Monday. I would encourage you all to get separate counsel. I said one more thing before I left. I said, for what it's worth, I would have kept paying. I probably would have kept paying forever. That's not something a law firm found for me. That's something I found out about myself. Then I picked up my folder and walked to the door. Marcus said very loudly that I was going to regret this. I said from the doorway without turning around, Marcus, I've been giving you money since you were 31 years old and I've never once asked what you were going to do with it. I think we both know who's been doing the regretting. Then I left. The legal process took 14 months. Marcus retained counsel. My parents retained counsel. There were depositions and discovery requests and a mediation session that lasted 9 hours and resolved nothing. The recorded promissory note held. It was exactly what it appeared to be. Prepared by a competent party, properly filed, fully enforceable. The settlement was $12,800,000. Less than the total owed, because collection is not the same as judgment, and because I was not interested in spending another 3 years of my life in a courtroom. Patricia negotiated a payment structure. A lien on Marcus's business, a lien on a property he owned in his wife's name with her cooperation. Celine signed the lien agreement herself, without being asked twice, and a 10-year repayment schedule. The first payment came in on a Monday morning in April. It was for $128,000. I transferred it the same afternoon to the Pediatric Oncology Research Foundation David had named in his trust amendment. Not as a gesture, not as a statement, simply because it was the right place for it to go, and I had the ability to make it go there. Marcus's business was restructured. He is still operating at a smaller scale. My parents and I speak twice a year on birthdays briefly. My mother sent me a card at Christmas with a note that said she hoped I was well, and that she was proud of who I'd become, which is the kind of sentence that has enough distance in it to not quite be an apology but not quite be nothing either. I kept the card. I don't know why. Celine called me once, 3 months after the settlement. She apologized. Not for Marcus, she was specific about that. She said she had watched it happen for years and hadn't said anything, and she was sorry for that. I said I appreciated it and I meant it. I told her she had nothing to clear with me. She said she knew. She still wanted to say it. That's not absolution. It doesn't make up for the years. But it's also not nothing, and I've learned to hold both things. David's letter is still in my coat pocket. I have transferred it from coat to coat for going on 2 years now. It is soft at the folds. The handwriting is still clear. The index card from my grandfather lives in the second drawer of my desk. The promissory note, the certified copy, is in a fireproof box in my study alongside every document from the last 11 years. I don't look at it often. I know it's there. There's a difference. The tomatoes came in late this year. I still pick them myself every morning. Here is what I know. I did not stop paying Marcus to punish him. I stopped paying because the ledger, the one I'd been running my whole life without seeing it, finally showed me the total. And once you see the total, once you can read the whole document with your professional eyes and understand what it actually says, you cannot choose to misread it anymore. I was not the family bank. I was the family member who had been standing at the counter long enough that everyone forgot I wasn't a fixture. The moment I stopped standing there, the transaction was over. That's not revenge. That's just closing the account. If this story reminded you that quiet people keep the receipts, and that generosity is a gift, not a debt, and it goes one direction, take that as your sign to look at whatever ledger you've been running and ask yourself what the real total is. Update what needs updating. Talk to whoever you've been afraid to talk to. And if you know someone who's been standing at that counter a little too long, share this with them. Drop a comment below. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.